Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to May's Shop Talk for Thursday, May 16th, 2024. If you could put in the chat, if you can hear me, want to make sure that we're not having any audio issues. Sounds good. All right, guys, a couple of things I want to get into from a housekeeping standpoint, just in case you're new here. Again, welcome. My name is Wesley Dees. I'm the host of this month's Shop Talk. I'm also the CEO of Student Housing Insight. If you don't know anything about Student Housing Insight, we are a platform for off-campus student housing professionals to network, learn, and share data. So if you don't know anything about us, go check us out at studenthousinginsight.com. We've got the chat ability on this webinar, and we'd love to utilize it today. So over in the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that. Would love for you guys to put in your name and your location. Love to see where everyone is coming from today. Also, if you've got any questions for our panelists today, you put that in the chat as well. I just ask that you put a Q in front of it so that it's a little bit easier for me to point out. I can make sure that we put it on the screen. So thanks so much for doing that. And with that being said, I'm going to bring up Matthew and Dave to the stage to get our updates from National Multi-Housing Council. Matthew and Dave, how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you, Wes?
Doing fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, hey, I know it was good seeing you guys last month in Austin for the Interface Conference. I feel like the past 3 weeks have flown by, and there's definitely a lot going on in DC. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thanks, Wes. We'll start with tax policy today. So as we've talked about in the past, the House of Representatives in late January passed tax legislation that included two really nice business provisions that could help the student housing industry. One on business investment for things that are put into student housing buildings. Those could have been expensed at 100% under the bill rather than being depreciated over time. And the second provision would have loosened limits on interest deductibility and let folks deduct more interest on their buildings without having to take a penalty on depreciation. Unfortunately, the Senate is not really moving forward on the bill right now due to opposition from the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, Mike Crapo from Idaho. Right now, it's unclear as to whether or not the bill will move forward and whether Leader Schumer from New York will put that bill on the floor. If it does, there's always the possibility the Senate could move forward with it. But as the days go by, the probability of this bill being enacted into law are shrinking rapidly. But, hope springs eternal. And as with every tax bill, they all die 1,000 deaths before they're resurrected. Setting that tax bill aside, we are turning our attention already very strongly to tax legislation in 2025. At the end of 2025, major provisions that really benefit the student housing industry expire. In fact, all the individual provisions enacted as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act go away at the end of 2025. And what that means in plain English is that for the partnerships and LLCs that dominate our industry and pay taxes on the individual side of the code, rates go up. The 20% small business deduction for qualified business income goes away. The estate tax exemption gets cut in half. And we're also guarding against the possibility, I should say, of really onerous revenue raisers that the Congress could look at to pay for an extension of current law tax policy to one degree or another. So that's stuff like life plan exchanges and carried interest. So we're already extraordinarily engaged with members and staff on Capitol Hill on these issues and laying the groundwork to try to get the best result we possibly can for the student housing industry. With that, Dave, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some of the other stuff we're working on.
All right. So again, if lots of you on this call are NMHC members, if you're not, some of the things I'm going to say or won't be pertinent to you, but would encourage you to think about joining. So one of the first things to talk about is a potential rule from the FCC, and that is going to ban or restrict bulk billing for providing broadband to your apartments that your students are in. This is an uninformed proposed rule by the FCC, which is, we've been dealing with them for quite a while. And unfortunately, what I would say is that everybody in a property, even though you may have negotiated with a provider for your building, that an individual student could go out and get their own broadband provider. Clearly not a good outcome. Clearly something that the FCC really doesn't understand. I think how our industry, both from a student as well as department, we are conducting a survey, which if you're an NMHC member and you've signed up for getting alerts from us, would have gone out to people in your company to take this survey, because one of the things that regulators always focus on is the more information we can get from industry impact, the better. So to that end, if you want to ask internally whether you're one, if you're a member of NMHC, and two, ask internally whether somebody's received this survey from NMHC, would have come out last week. Highly encourage you to participate. I did distribute it to a couple senior members within the student housing industry and got feedback that this is critically important, potentially costly for the industry. So something that know that we're engaged, know that we're pushing back, and may result in NMHC along with others filing a stop order or actually taking the FCC to court. So it's something that we will continue to give you updates here, just so you're aware of what's going on, given what we think is a pretty significant impact. Along the same lines, there are some, we have a construction and design committee at NMHC. There is student housing is represented on there. The one thing you'll know, if you're an NMHC member, we love to do surveys. And so it is a survey that we have out right now regarding certain impacts of building codes on development of your properties. I didn't put anything more on this one bullet point on impact of SCOTUS ruling, but it's actually pretty important. And this was oftentimes when new buildings are being built, whether conventional or student, local jurisdictions who must approve any of the new buildings oftentimes ask the industry to pay for something else. We want you to pay for that road, or we want you to do something with a sewer or whatever else. They were an area in California was taken to court, made it all the way to Supreme Court, and it was ruled, and I will call it in favor of the industry, such that local jurisdictions who were attempting to put a significant amount of impact fees, raising the cost of development, with this ruling will no longer be able to do that. So pretty important stuff as it pertains to what could be the impact on the delivered cost for a particular unit or bed. As we mentioned before, one of the things which, our industry doesn't get a lot of financing from HUD, but HUD recently came out with a ruling that all new properties are going to get financed through an FHA loan would need to comply with modern building codes, 2021 for ICC and 2019 for ASHRAE, depending on how many floors you have. Unfortunately, FHFA said, hey, they're doing this too. Let's evaluate whether we should do this. And clearly, the enterprises, Fannie and Freddie, are important sources of financing for us. This would potentially impact new properties being delivered. And so that's something that we will be sending a letter to the director of FHFA tomorrow or maybe Monday, expressing our concerns about them promulgating a rule that would have an impact on the industry as well. Cyber, clearly something your IT folks are always dealing with, and there are some proposed rules out from Department of Homeland Security that would have major impacts as it pertains to what you would have to do if you had a cyber issue and the timing of your disclosure and resolution, et cetera. So it's something that we're evaluating right now, and obviously we'll be in the process of commenting on that letter. The final thing, beating a drum, which we have beat quite frequently over the last year, which is called beneficial ownership. This is a program that's being initiated and run by a group out of the U.S. Department of Treasury called FinCEN. This requires you, when you're forming LLCs for properties that you own, that you have to disclose who the beneficial owners are within that program. If your companies are already getting financing from a bank or Fannie and Freddie, you're already doing this, right? So it's something you're already doing. The big difference and the big change, and where I think a lot of people are focused, is that if you are somebody who is required to register, and there are some exclusions from people who have to register, every single LLC that you had in existence prior to this year also has to enter into this new database. And I think a lot of people are kind of missing that. And there's an estimate that came out from FinCEN that there's 33 million LLCs that have to be registered. And as of the middle of February, which they haven't published updated, they'd only had about 400,000 out of the 33 million registered. Again, I think it's a lack of understanding from the industry, which is why we keep telling everybody that they need to think about this. In the meantime, FinCEN has been sued by a small business group, and they lost that. The small business group won that case. So we'll see what happens in terms of the evolution. And there's a lot of pushback from Congress as well to delay further implementation of this. But in the meantime, until that happens, highly recommend that, again, if you're somebody who controls that or deals with your accountants or attorneys or whatever else, that you think about meeting the requirements of that particular provision before the end of this year. So with that, we've taken a bunch of time. We're going to turn it back to you, Wes, and you guys want to hear about the Charlie Matthews show.
Dave, I got a black shirt on for you today, buddy.
I love it, my friend.
Matt and Dave, thanks so much for all of that. And I know we've also got, I believe next month, at some point in time at the end of next month, I believe registration's opening for the NMHC conference.
That is true. Yep.
All right. So I think second week of October this year?
Yeah, back in Vegas one more year.
Well, fantastic.
7th to the 9th.
Well, thanks so much, guys, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Wes.
Charlie, how are things?
Hey, buddy. We're good. We are good.
Let me work on bringing the rest of
bring the crew
rest of your panel up here. And while I'm doing that, it was good to see you in Austin last month, and a couple of the folks that are on here as well. It's been interesting. We were kind of wondering if that pre-leasing gap was going to get wider or if it was going to close. So we'll jump into that. But while I'm changing up some things here on this side, why don't you go ahead and go through the intro of the panel, and then we'll get into your report.
Absolutely. We got some way smarter people than me on here today. So super excited to have them join us. I do not want to do, I don't want to take any spotlight from them, so I'll let them introduce themselves. But Chelsea, we'll start with you and then go down.
Hi there. My name is Chelsea Harper. I am Regional Vice President of Property Management with the Price Company. We oversee currently 30 different markets, 76 sites, and we are just shy of 35,000 beds. Of that portfolio, I oversee 10 different markets: Raleigh, North Carolina; Jacksonville, Alabama; Auburn, Alabama; Wichita Falls, Texas; Wichita, Kansas; Bloomington, Indiana; Columbia, South Carolina; Clemson, South Carolina; Minneapolis, Minnesota; and Greenville, North Carolina make up my current portion of the portfolio. And I was asked to say markets that I'm specifically focused on right now, heading into the summer. Right now, our biggest focus are markets with smaller schools. And then, of course, I just mentioned that I have Clemson, South Carolina as part of my portfolio. We have 4 properties there. So that's a major focus of ours for the summer.
Awesome. We'll jump into those specifics here in a little bit. Lily.
Hi, my name is Lily. I'm with Redstone Residential out here in Utah. And I'm a regional vice president at Redstone. We have right at 30,000 beds under management currently. And we're in 23 different markets with 95 different sites. Personally, I oversee student operations here, so I get a little piece of all of those fun markets. And yeah, lots of interesting changes this year and a couple of different ones I'm sure we'll come back to, but it's been a great year so far.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Carmina.
Perfect. Well, thank you for inviting me on here. I'm Carmina Cabo. I am the Associate Director of Sales and Marketing at Cardinal. We currently manage 215 student deals in about 98 markets, and that's roughly around 86,000 beds under management right now. And out of those deals, I oversee about 109 of those in 44 different markets. So definitely a wide range. And then the markets I'm specifically kind of looking at going into summer is really, UNC, Gainesville, Morgantown, and Madison, Wisconsin are those deals.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Awesome. We got a wide array of markets to chat through.
Hey, Charlie, just to set this up for everybody, let's go through what it's been like on ShopTalk this academic season.
Yeah, everybody liked me a lot more. Probably from, I'd say, 2 years ago to about January 8th, and then my sentiments kind of went down a little bit. But yeah, we've seen a little bit of a decline and a slowdown.
Yeah, and you've got a great graph we'll get to here in a little bit, but just want to recap these numbers on year-over-year trend for this academic cycle. Things started in line in September and October. I would say September we weren't really tracking pre-leasing for ShopTalk at that point, and we're just kind of focused on how everything ended for the last cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But jumped up in November and December. And started, kind of coming back in line with the previous year. Last month reported negative 2.2. So excited to talk about this month.
Absolutely. So we got a little bit more, wide-ranging deck here that I want to kind of run through pretty quickly before I bring on, our lovely panelists here. But right now we've got pre-leasing behind roughly about 3%. So, add another point to what it was this time, 4 or 5 weeks ago, when we did this in April, excuse me. And I've seen it. I mean, there's tons of markets that were full, 90 days ago in 2022, in 2023, that are still, 15, 16, 17% behind. Again, they're closer to 80%, 75. But generally speaking, you're definitely see some slowdown. I wish I would have put the graph of the pre-leasing trends with the rates.
You want to do that now?
Well, it's hard to kind of put it together, but one of the big things that we've seen here. So if we look in context, I know it's kind of a tight graph here, but the red line is our present era, and then the light blue line above was last year, right? And so as you see, the delta with 23 and 24, or I guess AY 23, AY 24. Started roughly, from 2021, you're almost 15, 16, 17% there. So hot out of the gates. And then we've definitely seen things slow down. And I know a lot of our clients and people that I've talked to in the industry, somewhat of a halt on some of this late leasing where, if you look at it, the industry was roughly 60+% pre-leased in March. where this time last year, or this time in 2021, it was only 40, and you saw a ton of velocity in the latter half of the leasing cycle. So definitely hotter out of the gates, especially the last 2 years, as we've, seen tremendous rent growth as well. The demand's still there, as you see with pre-leasing velocity. So we're still ahead of, still ahead of 2022 by about 1.52%. So we're still in line with getting there, where you see that gap narrow, from 22 and 23 as we get into, latter half of May, early June and July. So all in all, we're still in a good spot. It's just, it's not going to outpace last year's insane leasing velocity, where I know there were a lot of people that leased up within a day in a lot of these markets. So,
and obviously there may be some things behind it that, we'll get into with the panel, but I mean, let's go back and now talk about rates.
Yeah. So rates definitely have tempered slightly. I think, this time last year, it was roughly about 10.7, closer to 11%. So you're still plus or minus, 7% there from a rent growth perspective nationally. And I will say a lot of this velocity slowdown is probably tied to some price, and a lot of groups aren't, what I would say, fire sailing those units or those beds, given the fact that they know the supply and demand's in their favor in the vast majority of these markets. Again, we'll get into part of that here in a moment. But, the Southeast, Southwest, and Midwest, similar trend from last year, outperforming the West and the Northeast. Obviously, a little bit of a higher cost of living there on the West and Northeast markets. But generally speaking, we're still seeing outsized rent growth and predominantly across a lot of these markets. Again, there's some that are struggling. But generally speaking, the fundamentals are strong, not double digits, but I think, any owner out here would take 7%, if you're looking at it, from, kind of pre-2022 era, for sure.
Well, and I think even compared to last month, I believe that average rate per bed was what, 957 or something. So it's even going up since last month. So
yeah. So, and again, last year, I think, you still saw, with that high leasing the expedited leasing velocity in a lot of these markets. people were full before they had the idea to even move a rent. So generally speaking, I still anticipate the market, the industry getting to, plus 93% occupancy to end this year. It might be a little bit of a grind to the finish, but the supply and demand fundamentals in, the vast majority of these markets are there. I know Carmina mentioned Madison, Wisconsin. There's a handful of markets that are seeing some slowdowns due to new supply, but it's so concentrated in a lot of these markets that it's not a predominant kind of challenge, because supply is actually down. So anyway, definitely something to keep in mind. But I look at this from a standpoint of last year was crazy. This year is still outsized comparatively to years prior. And I think a lot of this slowdown is due to the fact that a lot of these groups are kind of holding the line on the rates that they've
look at that difference over the past 4 years.
You're up 4 years, you're up whatever that is. My math isn't very good, but $170 on average per bed. Pretty substantial. But yeah,
get a floor plan.
Yeah, jump to the floor plans. And again, similar kind of trend we've seen here. The smaller unit types a little bit behind. The larger unit types, not as much. Again, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s continue to see a trend. Even on year 5s, being down 4%, it's not 10 like it is on the studios in the 1 bedroom. So, or it's primarily studios, the 2 bedroom or the 1 bedrooms are about 6% there. So definitely seeing a lot of these properties have their larger unit types full, where, and historically speaking, if you had a 4 and a 5 bedroom left, you're freaking out this time of year, because it's kind of harder to find 5 people to live in a 5 bedroom.
Sure.
A lot of these have studios, 1s and 2s, and it's just at a higher price point. It's the only correlation that I can tell.
Yeah.
And as we kind of look for it, so I added these 2 slides here, just to add a little bit more context. So product, if you look at urban, garden, cottage, so urban infill is predominantly, what we see in student housing here. Mid-rise, high-rise, garden style, more of your vintage product, and then cottage. I guess now not as common for just student housing because of the build-to-rent sector and whatnot. But generally speaking, the 3 product types, you're seeing a similar trend, but from a rent growth perspective, again, we've got, from a percentage basis, pretty strong. So, 6% off of 1030 is a little, is from a dollar amount perspective is much different than 6.9% off the 695. So you're definitely seeing the ability to push those rents only 3% behind. And then the proximity to campus. I think one of the key things, if you look here, is that even at, even the properties that are further out, call it 2+ miles, they're somewhat behind a little bit, but generally speaking, everything's relatively in line. It's just your price per bed kind of differs depending on how close you get to campus. Obviously premium on location there. And then the last thing I want to show here, or the last couple things, is, as I mentioned on supply and demand, there's a lot of markets that are seeing some concentrated development. I know like last year we saw it in like a Gainesville, Florida, Austin, Texas. I know there's a lot coming actually into Austin this year too. Madison, Wisconsin this year. I know there's there's 3 or 4 deals that are leasing up. So a lot of this supply. So if you look at this in comparison from 2011 to 2018, you're averaging about 53,000 beds delivered. Over, I guess, call it from 2022 forward, it's probably closer to about 37,000, 38,000. So you're down 30+%, and it's not getting any easier to develop or deliver these projects. They're probably getting less projects with larger beds just because they're having to make these, spread these costs around. And, it's the same kind of headache for delivering 400 than it is 1,500. So a lot of these groups are building bigger too.
Is the 2026 pipeline, is that pretty much shut at this point? Or do you think there's still a couple more that will come on?
Depends. I mean, probably not going to see much more. I would actually see that number actually go down more than go up if things get pushed a little bit with timelines. I know last year was challenging from a delivery standpoint. And I even think some of the, call it a, 5% of the 2025 might actually get pushed to 2026 just because of that as well. So, we're constantly kind of updating and looking at different, each different project. But a lot of this is, as you look at even like the 27 stuff we're seeing, I mean, people are starting pretty soon to get those deals in place so they deliver on time, which is a big, I know last year was a big challenge, and it wasn't anything that was COVID related or supply chains. It took a lot longer to get these deals to deliver.
Gotcha. Yeah. Is there any P3 included in that?
The P3s, not residence halls. So P3, okay. So if it's a private developer, but if it's a P3 that's going to be a residence hall that a private developer is building, but the university is going to run or manage the leasing and or own, or not own, I would say. They're partnering with the university, if you will. It would not be included in there. Okay. So like the giant project that's going on, the 2,200 beds in Knoxville is not included in there.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And then also from a school's perspective, so enrollment. So as you look at this, so this is for 2023. So actual enrollments for fall 2023. Your larger universities continue to get bigger. Your smaller universities, tier 2, tier 3, are shrinking. That was a trend we saw the last couple of years as well. And as you see here, I mean, you look at the rent growth perspective just on those tier 1 universities. I mean, they're getting the numbers versus, like the smaller markets, again, lower rate per bed. So from a dollar amount, not as material, but you're definitely seeing kind of a downward trend. And of the groups we're talking to that are either owners or lenders or developers or anyone, it's all eyeballs are really on that tier 1, some of the tier 2 stuff, but predominantly it's got to be about over 20,000 full-time enrollment and not declining to really get anything done. So yeah, definitely something to kind of keep in mind here is, I mean, we still have students still coming to college. It's just the larger state schools continue to get larger. I mean, I think like to use Knoxville again, another 6% in enrollment growth. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the tier 3. They've had the largest enrollment decrease out of the 3, but they've had they've had the they're in between as far as the year-over-year pre-lease growth, but and they're also in between on the average rate. So that's interesting.
Yeah. The challenge though is that they're 59% pre-lease and everything else is closer to full. So it's just a little bit more challenging in some of those markets for sure.
So let's open it up to the panel.
Absolutely. Enough of me talking. Do you want to kind of hide this so we can bring everybody on there, Wes?
Sure.
I'm going to pull up the questions just to make sure I'm asking appropriately. Awesome. Awesome. Well, excited to kind of chat there. I wanted to kind of paint the picture as it relates to what's going on in the industry, so we can get the real perspective of what's happening in these respective markets. We had a pre-call yesterday where we kind of chatted through a couple, but I do think that one of the growing trends that I've been hearing doing this is being on ShopTalk is that there are a lot of markets that you didn't expect to be the problem child, and then you have some that are, I wouldn't say surprising, but that you thought would give you some sort of challenges that are now, the bells of the ball. So Chelsea, I know we talked a little bit about this in yesterday, but the two markets you mentioned were Auburn and Clemson. I feel like it's a tale of two cities. It actually is. But talk to me what's kind of happening.
Tale of two tigers.
Tale of two tigers. Yeah. But anyway, what's going on? What's challenging especially in Clemson? Let's start there, and then we can talk about what's happening in the positive way in Auburn.
Yeah, for sure. So, hey Trey, thank you. So I can't have 4 deals in Clemson and not speak to that heartburn. And it's not necessarily heartburn. If this was a normal market and a normal time frame, this was arguably one of the best markets. I thought it was the best market in student housing last year. We were all cruising at 100% pre-lease, just about. All of the downtown assets completely full by the end of September. This year has been a totally different story for Clemson. I'm going to use some buzzwords that were used and traded a lot during last month's ShopTalk and Interface, which is, that I think we hit our ceiling here with rates. And I think that that's really what's driving the slowdown here, is that you've got the growth that's happened at 10% the last 2 years, year over year. So you're looking at 20% rate growth for a lot of these assets. And now the students and the parents both are like, let's hit the brakes. Let's look at our options a little bit more than they have in the past. So, we've also got some new development coming online, 1,200 beds between the Pier and the One. And there's a lot of buzz around campus about some new development that's coming online within the next few years, an additional 3,500 beds. This market still looks healthy to us, though. You've got a goal, according to the chancellor, of 50,000 students for enrollment. They're just shy of 37,000 undergrad right now, and are looking to do, 29,000 in enrollment right now. And they're looking to grow 2% for the next few years until they can get to that point. So, it's healthy. All of the trends are showing that Clemson is going to fill up. It's just a little bit more painful than what we've been used to. Another buzzword is FAFSA. A lot of our panelists at Interface were saying that FAFSA really isn't impacting these top 100 schools, but here, this is the latest that the university has made housing and FAFSA announcements in years. They're rolling through June as far as university announcements and housing announcements go. They just started sending out their financial aid packets in late April. And I think all of that is probably a good story as to why the Clemson market has slowed down. I am here to tell you, if anybody else is listening and has assets in the Clemson market, we're still confident. The students are still there. All of our data shows that they're still there. It's just like Charlie mentioned, they're kind of holding out. I think they're waiting to see what their best option is, and also waiting to hear some university decisions.
Chelsea, what's been the typical timeline for releasing those assignments and those financial packages?
So the financial packages, typically January is when the bulk of those, I think, has been released in the past. University housing in the last 5 years for Clemson has not been announced past April. So this is the latest it's ever been.
Okay.
At least in recent recollection. You'll have to forgive me. My memory is not what it used to be, but at least in the last 5 years, it's the latest.
And it has nothing to do with them leaving the ACC, huh?
Hey, that's a different story. Can't talk. I'm not trying to make a bunch of people mad at me today.
That's crazy.
And Charlie also asked me about our other Tigers, which is Auburn. Auburn is a big success story. I love those schools. They're very similar to one another. Markets are pretty similar to one another. Student base is very similar. I'm going to speak to pricing again here. I think that that's the difference. You're still seeing some really healthy rent growth in Auburn, but your average rate for Clemson, I think, according to College House, was $1,010 per bed, and Auburn's still in the 970s for average. So I think that that's the story there. You've got more affordability in that market. The university announcements there have been a little faster, and I think that's also helping us.
Yeah, I will say also to Auburn, the on-campus housing has been a challenge as well. A lot of aging dorms, and I think they just went through a renovation plan or took 2 offline, something along those lines. So, an additional 1,000 kids in that market is, having a lease off campus. And I know there's a handful of master leases as well or maybe 3 or 4 master leases that are anywhere from 3 to 5 years that are in that Auburn market. So it's definitely something where the supply and demand, and you look at enrollment continues to go up. And again, as Chelsea mentioned, like a lower rent per bed, it's really, really challenging to get a new development deal to actually pencil in those markets and have someone understand the theory of, hey, if it's got to be over $1,000 a bed, are you really going to be, tell me your story, how you're going to be at $1,300 a bed and, jump $300 on the overall market. So definitely see that as a common trend in a lot of these schools that were, I would say Auburn was a tough market, but it was never a 99% with, double digit rent growth, at least for the last 5 years since I've been around. So definitely a tale of 2 tigers there. But no, that's super helpful. Jumping coasts a little bit.
Hey, Charlie, just real quick, just got a question in from Pete at College Pads. Chelsea, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Are they putting in any on-campus beds at Clemson as well?
They have. It's been pretty similar to what Charlie just mentioned with Auburn. Some of the aging dorms they've taken offline, and they've built some new on-campus beds.
I think it's been kind of a net like even kind of supply standpoint. So there was a little bit of a decrease, and then they were back. But they have the land there to actually build. So yeah. But I know Auburn is right in the heart of campus is trying to knock down, I think it's 2 dorms, and I think you're actually going to have a net negative, but they're going to be newer. So it'll be prettier. But anyway, definitely seeing a handful of schools kind of take a more reactive approach as it relates to on-campus housing versus, they got to get the students before they can get the money to build a lot of the stuff. So you definitely see a little bit of pain there. Anyway, so transitioning from the East Coast, I want to bring in Carmina and Lily here. Lily, I know Redstone has a ton of stuff on the East Coast as well, but predominantly kind of west of the Mississippi River. We talked about positive things of like the Santa Barbaras of the world. They call that the Knoxville of the West, where you just have a massive housing crisis, enrollment's up. I think generally speaking, not just at the school, but in the city of Santa Barbara, you definitely have a housing crisis. And then good old Pullman, Washington. So what's going super well in Santa Barbara?
I think you nailed it, right? I do think the school is trying to control their enrollment, given the demand for housing, but we're seeing quick lease ups January, February, and some really high rental increases. So it's a great market. I love visiting Santa Barbara for obvious reasons. And we love working with the school there. So excited though, we've got some deliveries in the pipeline, and we're excited to kind of have that growth on campus. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dormzilla was officially killed. So
yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, that was wild. No windows in your dorms and call it a day. So luckily that's not a thing anymore.
No. Yeah. Site visits to Santa Barbara. I think there's a list, a queue out the door of people that are signing up to do that over there at Redstone.
Yeah, it's never a problem.
If you ever need anybody, I'll go as well. Pullman, Washington, though, I'm gonna have to have a wedding or a engagement party or something. I don't know if I'm making it to Pullman. What's the challenges you're seeing in Pullman? I know a lot of people, ask me about that market on a consistent basis. Hey, Charlie, where's the leasing? I was like, I'm not your guy. So So talk to me about what you're seeing on the ground there in that market specifically.
Yeah, I think I emailed you yesterday, Charlie. Market. Yeah, I mean, the problem, classic economics, like we chatted about yesterday, where enrollment is decreasing several years in a row. And even as enrollment started to trend down, you started to see these new developments come up and delivered last year, this year, next year. So hopefully, maybe they'll push back kind of those last phases that are supposed to be delivered next year. But we're facing some really hard pricing wars, concessions, and just trying to stay ahead of that. And honestly, I think in some cases we're looking at, should we compete with the shadow market to help us here? So that's our Pullman situation.
Yeah. And I think especially a good segue to bring Carmina on here is one of the things we've seen as a trend, at least over the last 6 months, is the markets that are what I would call urban in nature. I know Pullman's more of a traditional college town, but definitely seeing some challenges that the conventional, just rent regular conventional market rate apartments is bringing to, I guess, the subset that really wasn't there the last couple of years. As the run up in rents on the conventional market, I guess student had a little bit of a lagging indicator, but last week, or I guess not last week, last month at Interface, we took a look at one of my other panelists on the data panel had showed the number of deliveries of conventional housing over the last, I think, 24, 36 months. Astounding, 66,000, I think the number was, it was 16% ahead of where the top deliveries were over the last 10 years. So you saw this huge spike. And now, again, you're seeing a little bit of softening in that market from some of the, again, basic economics there. I mean, I know we talked about USC. Definitely a market. LA has seen tons of development in and around that area. What's one of the some of the challenges? I know it's a little bit different of a portfolio that you're running over there because it's mix of shadow market, and then there's a couple actual purpose-built apartment communities. But what's different this year in LA that you were seeing in years past? Because I know part of that portfolio, actually both of those parts of your portfolio, were pretty much the first to get off the shelves.
Yeah, definitely. We talked about this yesterday in regards to kind of Stu-Ho, and that was definitely not something that we worried about, year over year. So it's definitely something now. I mean, I think the whole market overall is negative 24 variance year over year. So there's a lot of that shadow market conventional rates that are kind of impacting our leasing. So really engaging kind of in that price competition is generally, not really a sound of like economic strategy. It's like we lower our rates, stay competitive, they lower their rates, stay competitive, and we'll never reach kind of like that lower rate conventional deal. So this time around, we're kind of investing our time and just like the market research to gain kind of a better understanding of the value of our community. Because before we used to get Greek life, that was like the easy thing. 4 or 5 people will come in, they take over our house, and we're just not seeing a lot of that nowadays, especially this year. So we're just trying to kind of leverage, where our location is, how close we are to campus, kind of highlight that in our marketing plan, and seeing the value, kind of the lifestyle you'll get at these student communities versus, the conventional kind of typical office.
For sure. And I definitely think you have personally, I have friends that lived in actually some of the Stu-Ho properties when they were in school, and it's now, again, I think there's been a couple new developments that have come into the market that are pure student, of course, and a couple more on the way. But in those urban markets, it's really, I'd imagine, really challenging when the conventional property is offering 2, 3, 4 months free rent with a penalty of 1 month to break your lease. So these students have options, and it's, whether they make the decision or not, they have to. It's just they're taking their time.
Hey, quick question for the panel. And looking at these markets that you guys have got some concern with, are you seeing less traffic, less touch points with prospective residents? Is that kind of staying in line with where it's been each year?
I wouldn't say we're seeing a decrease in traffic. Like if I compare our numbers year over year, we're seeing tours, we're seeing digital leads, And it's just the shop process has just extended itself. And I did a panel, I did a survey actually to all of our teams this morning. I said, why are they not closing? What's delaying the process? About half of them said pricing concerns, and the other half said not sure of plans for the fall relating to FAFSA. So,
Gotcha.
but the leads are there, right? That's to speak to Chelsea's point. We feel confident that we're not losing our demographic. It's just delayed.
Carmina, how about with Cardinal?
Yeah, I would definitely say, I mean, it definitely is a decrease in regards to traffic, but like Lily mentioned, it's more of like a digital traffic now. People kind of go into this already doing their kind of research before. I think, when we used to lease, they came through the door, they went through the model, they signed in person, and now it's kind of, you got to get them in the first impression. So it's really optimizing your website to make sure kind of it tells the story that you need it to. But a lot of the touch points too that we're having is, we're closing a lot of leads due to non-responses. So I don't know if that's typical, like just Gen Z and just kind of leaving you on red, as they would say. But we've definitely noticed a decline in that portion of like finishing out the whole process fully like they used to.
Getting ghosted.
Yeah.
Wow.
All the time.
Well, hey, I've got one more question for you guys before we head over to Dan and talk a little bit about what's going on with the Mental Wellness Coalition. But obviously, graduation, has either happened or it's about to happen for most of your locations. Let's talk a little bit about that summer slide and how you guys are possibly retooling your marketing plan. Or maybe you're keeping with the marketing plan. How's that? How has this point in the leasing season, how is that impacting how you're moving into the summer?
So I would definitely say it kind of is in conjunction for the price company with the discussion of traffic. The traffic is up year over year, obviously, because we still have leasing left to do, and we are still advertising those available beds. But I do think there is an increase in the touch points before a prospect is going to take that plunge now. I have been shocked in recent travel that there has been an increase in the volume of parents who are physically going to go see these assets themselves before they finally, sign up to be the guarantor for their student, which is a shift that we haven't seen in the last few years, right? All of the kids who went to college or even graduated high school during the years of the pandemic were used to being thrown off of campus pretty quickly and having to make these decisions very quickly. I think that we're maybe seeing a shift in the type of student that we're getting, where they want some more of that personal contact. And so by saying that, we've increased our in-person marketing. Some of our old school tactics that those of us who have been in student housing for a long time are used to, physically going on campus, physically going to local restaurants and businesses and giving them promotional items. That's something I think every one of us could probably agree that we had scaled back on pretty significantly in the last few years.
So everybody's had to figure out how to use the big stapler now to put all those.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and like Carmina and Lily said, the digital presence still has to be there. You gotta get them in the first place. But yeah, some of these leasing agents that have just come into student housing, we got to teach them how to talk to people again. Go out there and actually hand out a flyer.
Goodness.
I think for my marketing approach moving into the summer, we talk here in a lot of generalizations and trends, but when it comes to marketing, we have to be really specific site by site and see what the competitive advantage you have at this site. Charlie had those slides, and there's not really a clear winner as far as floor plans or product type or location from campus. Each of those things, you have a demographic for your site. So finding your competitive advantage and really promoting that through your property reputation. To speak to Chelsea's point, right, we've got like this physical outreach. We have street teams, and I love our street teams. It's very fun. And it's like, okay, how do we make those 10 times more effective? We will hire photographers to follow around our street teams, take pictures of resident life events, and then we bring that over to our digital side, and I think it ties together well.
Carmina, how about for you guys?
Yeah, I think we would definitely do the same thing. I think just for the summer approach with students not being there, we're definitely pivoting our marketing approach to more digital. Like Chelsea was mentioning, doing our social media advertising, email campaigns, targeted online ads. And then also kind of revamping our websites. I know we've done a lot of that at a lot of our communities, whether that's incorporating kind of features of like AI, virtual assistant, virtual tours, FAQ pages, just because they're not going to be there physically to see it. So we really want to make sure that the prospects get that opportunity to see it before, signing a lease. So, and also adding kind of like translation options for international students. That's a big factor we're putting into our marketing plan. And then also with like ILSs, changing those. I know we spoke about that yesterday. Something that might have worked last year, it may not work this year. So my team is proactively kind of conducting, monthly research into their lead sources for their portfolio, and then able to kind of accurately give recommendations to the clients to be able to change those things midway. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full 12-month contract. If we need to jump ILSs and go to a more conventional ILS that we may not be used to using all the time, we have that data to back that up. So then the clients can change it for the summer and then go back, to more of the student ILSs in the fall.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I've run out of time for this segment, but thanks so much for giving up part of your Thursday to come in and help everybody in the industry kind of get their head around what's going on. I appreciate it so much. Charlie, thanks for all that you and your team at College House.
No, Wes, thank you. I know it's a labor of love putting this together. So if anybody doesn't know, Wes puts his heart and soul into this stuff. So if you're not involved in Student Housing Insight, do so. It's a great thing. Wes is a great guy, and my panel's awesome as well. So have a great Thursday, everybody.
Thanks.
Take care, guys. All right. So I want to remind everybody, May is actually, well, I've got to put slides together. Dan, give me just a second here. I got a quick announcement I need to make. So I just for those that don't know, the leadership committee or ShopTalk is actually a lot of the subjects and things that we put together each month is based off of feedback that I get from our leadership committee. Our leadership committee is led by 6 executives from firms that are involved in student housing operations and ownership. And we've got 2 seats that are coming up this summer, actually in August, that will be vacant. And so we're looking for 2 folks to fill those seats for a 2-year term. There's 2 requirements. You must actively be involved in the ownership and or management of a student housing portfolio in at least 3 different U.S. markets. And you must have 5+ years of experience in the student housing industry, either on or off campus. So if you were interested in doing a 2-year term with us, I've got some information here where you can go fill out a interest form. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to shoptalk.info/apply and do that. So as I excuse me, as I started to say earlier, May is mental wellness month, and we wanted to make sure that we got a update from folks that serve our coalition. So I wanted to bring on Dan to give us a quick update. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Let me pull some of these other folks up here so they don't feel like they've got to smile for everybody. There we go. I think we're set now. Well, hey, really quick, congratulations on to Campus Advantage and Student Quarters and yourself for the launch of this new company, Centricity, and you being appointed president.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, and today I'm here not in that capacity, but in the capacity as a member of the leadership team for the College Student Mental Wellness Advocacy Coalition. I'll be referring to it as the coalition because it's somewhat of a mouthful, but we believe this is extremely relevant and important all of the time. But Wes, as you pointed out, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I appreciate you inviting us to be a part of this episode. You can go to the next slide. Okay. The coalition is something hopefully many of you are already familiar with. But before I get into what we're doing, what's next, and how you can get involved, which is really the focus of today. I do want to provide a little bit of an origin story. I posted some links in the chat that I'll refer to as we go through, and I'm aware that we've got a limited amount of time. But I want to tell you, for those who don't know about the coalition, or for those of you who've maybe seen it referenced at a conference, or they've seen one of us on the leadership team, I want to give you the backstory. And so the quick version is that, thanks to some amazing humans who also happen to be competitors in the student housing industry, rallying together, we are in a position where this coalition is creating some real impact and change by competitors coming together to say, let's raise the bar for everybody. And just a little bit of background on this, it intersects with this very show in a lot of ways. And some of you know, and some of you were involved in the initial calls a few years ago. There was a pandemic, some of you may recall, and not to bring up too much PTSD, you recall that a lot of us started getting together on some regular calls, and that's became this industry call. And we were getting updates from folks, starting out with, hey, where are you getting your electrostatic sprayers and disinfectant, to what are you doing to stay in communication with residents, and everything in between. And what happened is a bunch of us started getting together and talking and collaborating, and it was groups that may be competing and everything else, but we were saying, hey, let's come together and see what we can do. Now, Wes has taken that and been gracious enough through his network with Student Housing Insights to really take on the administration of the continuation of those meetings, which has become this ShopTalk, and really a service to our industry. And in a similar vein, this group of leaders came together and said, how could we continue this conversation and do some real good? And we all know that mental health among college students is a massive issue and a major concern, and something that we all want to focus on. And so without belaboring the backstory too much, what we were able to do was to piggyback on some amazing work that has been done by American Campus Communities and the Hi, How Are You? Project, which is a great nonprofit out of Austin that is already doing incredible work in the area of mental health. And so the Student Housing Mental Wellness Advocacy Coalition has come alongside Hi, How Are You? And formed this coalition. And what I want to share with you today is kind of what has happened so far, what's happening next, and then how can you get involved. And so so far, what has happened, the coalition formed. So what was initially the work that ACC and Hi, How Are You had been doing just exploded into now having almost every operator in the industry represented as a member, a funding member of this coalition. These operators have come together to represent over 800,000 beds within the industry. And the first works that were done were finding out what the landscape is. We knew that there are issues. There's plenty of research showing that mental health among college students is a major concern. So the focus of the coalition's research that we commissioned through Ipsos, which is one of the largest research firms in the world, and this is the largest study that's ever been done of its kind, helped us to identify commonalities among thriving students. What are the things that we know there's problems out there, but what are the things, particularly within the context of residential environments, that help students thrive? So we were able to pull some very tangible results, and those are available to you right now through the study that is up on the coalition website. And armed with that data, we're now moving that index to happen every other year, where you're going to be able to take advantage of not only the data, but also the resources that the coalition is now creating. So that kind of gets us to what is coming up next. And we are developing several different resources that coalition members are going to be able to use. One of them, which should have a launch next week, is a postvention toolkit for member properties. And while I mentioned that the majority of the coalition work is really focused around what helps students to thrive, we know that there are tragic incidents that occur on sites where we may have a loss of life. And we've partnered with the JED Foundation to create the postvention toolkit, where now all member properties are going to have at their fingertips a workbook to help their staff and their residents get through a situation where we've had a tragic loss of life or something at a site. And so we're really looking forward to launching that and getting that first big resource out to the membership. We're continuing to work with partnerships with other vendors in the space. So think things like apps that you may have on your phone right now that are focused on mental health. We're engaged in some high-level conversations with some international companies to bring, to determine what resources we want to bring to members of the coalition. We're going to be really continuing to hinge all of this around the work of the Hi, How Are You project. And they have something called the Happy Habits. I'd encourage you to look that up, look for a pledge that they offer. We'll be putting out more and more of their proven research content, as well as developing peer-to-peer videos. So these are going to be aimed at this population that we now represent of nearly 1 million residents around the country and now around the world. We got our first international member who we started talking to actually this week. And we're going to be doing peer-to-peer videos, training resources for staff, continuing the survey every other year, doing events through Hi, How Are You? And so that's what is ahead. And it's, before I get into the specific ways that you can get involved. Oh, we're at time already. I just, want to reflect on the fact this is just such an incredible.
This is the thing you got to remember, Dan. There's about half the people that register that show up for the live version, and then the rest of them watch it on YouTube or the replay, and that's edited. So,
well, we'll make it quick regardless. But before I jumped into how you can get involved, if you're a supplier or a partner, basically not an operator, I think I just want to double click on the fact that this is a passion project, and it's pretty exciting to be able to think about all that has been discussed over the last hour. All the numbers that are represent lives, and the lives of the team members who are working at our properties, and the lives of the residents who are living with us and their families, and that this is truly an opportunity for all of us to just make a really big human impact. And so I would encourage you, if you want to get involved, scan the QR code on the screen. You can also visit thrivingcollegestudents.org and find out how to get involved there. The next few slides have an overview of sponsorship opportunities, and they range from title sponsors, which are a minimum contribution. These are tax deductible donations through Hi, How Are You project. This is for an entity that wants to have a big splash and have their name associated with and be a part of bringing some of these resources that are going to affect that nearly 1 million students that we represent. So you can see on this, and you'll get this information if you scan the QR code. You'll see an overview of this and be able to use the PDF that's in the chat box for those title sponsors that might want to sponsor things like the peer-to-peer video projects. The next level it allows you to really get involved at a smaller investment or smaller donation through being a mental wellness champion, and you get to be a part of the discussions about what we are going to create, what we're going to use with this data, be a part of workshopping how we want to continue to make this impact. And then finally, we really wanted to make sure that everyone can be involved. And so for a donation of $1,000 as a minimum, you can be a mental wellness supporter, and there can be a logo exchange. You can then proudly display the coalition's logo on your materials and show that you are a part of this important work. And so that we hope that whether someone wants to really jump in and support one of these major initiatives that we're doing, or wants to just show that you believe that this is an incredibly important topic to support, there's a range of ways to do it. And we ask you to scan that QR code, fill out the form. Someone will get back to you from the coalition leadership, and we're excited to get you involved and continue this really great work. And Wes, thank you for giving us the time to be a part of ShopTalk.
Hey, if it wasn't for you and a couple other people, I wouldn't even have this opportunity. So thank you for kind of allowing me to take this to something that, hey, we're getting. I think we had 120, 130 people registered for today, and love seeing how ShopTalk is growing. Love that you guys are doing this. I've had so many vendors and suppliers that have come to me, and I know have come to other board members that have said, hey, we want to help, we want to do something. And I just love that this is coming out, and we've got it at a price point where everybody can be involved and really should be involved. So thanks so much for the time that you and the other members are putting together for this. And I'm really excited to see that, that next resource come out from Jed. I know that was a big lift, and appreciate you guys working on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, guys, our next Shop Talk will be Thursday, June 13th. So actually just a little less than a month away. And if you've gotten any benefit out of today's meeting, we just ask that you share it with your colleagues. You can have them go to shoptalk.info. Again, that's shoptalk.info. And they can register to receive our monthly reminders of the meeting. Well, guys, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.